This week's episode of I Was a Teenage Film Snob is not brought to you by a sponsor, as always. It is, however, a collaboration with filmmaker J.R. Stokes and his new film EdgeX, which is available right now on YouTube for free. So go and check it out and then listen to the episode. Welcome to I Was a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, your friendly neighborhood film snob. And guys, it's another solo show. The team is on the bench this week, but I have a fantastic guest lined up for you. Someone I've been talking to for the last 3 months or so. Looking forward to having a chat about movies, as we always do here. And today's guest is a young New York born and raised filmmaker. And his debut film has just released on YouTube. I even talked about it in the most recent show. So if you haven't watched it yet, please go and watch it because it is a harrowing tale, but so well made and so worth your time. I could go on and on, but I just want to get started. He just seems like such a fun dude, despite how terrifying his movie is. Please welcome the director of EdgeX. It's J.R. Stokes. Welcome, mate.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, James.
It is lovely to have you here, man. I've been looking forward to this, but after watching your film, I was a little bit scared as well because, oh boy, that is a tough movie.
Yeah, it was tough to make, it was tough to sit through it like 10 million times.
Yeah, I watched it a couple of times. I was saying just before because I always like to go in. I said I don't do too much preparation, but when it comes to films, I got to watch them a couple of times. And I think when you reached out, you're like, it's kind of like Requiem for a Dream. I think that's kind of like that to me was.
Yes.
I was like, all right, I've seen Requiem for a Dream once.
Yeah.
Like, can I stomach sit through it? But it's interesting, and we'll get into the filmmaking process and the story and everything.
Yeah.
But it has a couple of earmarks that I do like, maybe over Requiem for a Dream, which I'm sure people are like, how dare you? But I will say that there's some decisions in the film to have some, there's a little bit of hope in it. There's some opportunities for redemption. There's some remorse, which I feel like compared to something like Requiem for a Dream, you don't really see. So I really like that. Because I will say this, like your film is scary. Like
oh, thank you.
There are moments where it plays like a horror film. And
wow.
Like for me, like, obviously it's this, cautionary tale and all this stuff. But there are moments I'm sitting there and I was asking before we started recording, like you play ostensibly the villain of the film. Like the villain is drugs, guys. The villain is drugs in the movie.
Yes.
But your character, I guess, is the closest thing we have. And whenever you're on screen, on screen, that's when I get the most scared. So,
wow.
I think
I'll take that as a compliment.
Oh,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
It's such a powerful performance. It's like, it's so like, and like there are plenty of kind of scary scenes, like seeing people go through withdrawals and seeing the way they react to drug use. And they're even like the main character, Chester, I almost forgot for a second.
Yes, sir.
Like has his scary moments. Cynthia has her scary moments, but they seem to be almost driven by, what's fueling them or what they're after. Whereas your character, like, there's a whole nother level of darkness to him. And I don't know how you juggled writing and directing and acting. I know people do it, but I don't, like with a film of this budget and this magnitude, I don't know how you did it, but like, one of the scariest performances I've seen, definitely this year. You just bring such an intensity to it, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That means a lot, actually. Thank you.
I was watching. I'm like, is that because I hadn't really seen you? I've obviously got friends on Instagram, and I'd seen your face. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I think that's him. And that's only on my second viewing that I realized. I'm like, oh my god, I watched this whole film. I didn't even pick up on it. That's him.
I actually purposely didn't include my name in the opening credits because, like, number one, it already says like directed by me. I didn't want to shove my name in the face of everyone watching right away, and also like. I did sort of want to catch people off guard, at least people that I knew in my personal life, like, like, wow, is that him? That's so, I can imagine that maybe it was a little odd seeing like, whoa, that's the director. It's interesting. You mentioned before, like having a juggle of like the parts in such a small production. And, I think that's a really great point to touch on because number one, I still don't know how I did it. And number two, I had a really great supporting cast around me of crew
Mm.
members. I mean, it was a very tiny crew, but I had such incredible individuals around me. And, my scene partner, Allie, she was great. And our makeup artist and our boom mic guy. And we just, the people behind the scenes really helped make this movie.
Mm.
And also, I had a shit ton of therapy after the fact.
Okay.
So that helped me out a lot too.
That's awesome, man. I think it's so important, and like, I love hearing those stories. Like it's almost this kind of guerrilla style filmmaking where
Oh, yeah.
it's this passion just to get the story told. But one thing that like this film has impressed me on so many levels, and impressing me is not the point of it, obviously, but just
Yeah, of course.
looking at it, like one thing that really amazed me was the scope of the film. Like you mentioned, like you had your boom guy, like everyone was doing things. I was looking through the credits on IMDb and I saw everyone like picked up like a mic at one point, and like you're
Yes.
doing a bunch of stuff. But even though it's so like it is a small production, if you really pay attention, like it's a couple, like the film shot over a couple of rooms and it is a small cast, it doesn't
Yes.
feel small. It feels quite big, and I don't know whether it's the storytelling or just kind of the epic journey they go on because
Thank
there
you.
is a
I
lot of
appreciate
jumping
that.
around between time frames as well. But it
Yes,
feels
there
a
is.
lot larger than what it actually is. And you can't always say that about these mainstream Hollywood films. This is not the anti-mainstream Hollywood podcast. I love that stuff as
Sure.
well. But you go watch big films,
Yeah.
sometimes you're like, man, they're shooting this all on a soundstage. You can really tell it's so small, but I don't know how you did it. But it feels quite grand in scale.
Thank
It's really
you. I,
impressive,
I
man.
appreciate that. And a lot of the rooms that you see in the film are in the same house as well. So we were
Okay.
just making the most of it. We had so there's a child actor in the film who plays the character Cynthia. She plays her little sister. Her
Yes.
name is Charlotte Stabile, and her mother, Sarah Stabile, she was a huge part in not only just being there for us, but also she let us use like her apartment, and
Oh wow.
it was great. So every little room in her apartment we managed to use for different scenes, and then of course we had some other really great people help out with lending us locations, letting us shoot for a couple hours. So we just tried to make the most of it.
That's really interesting because I would not have picked that. Like there are a couple of rooms where you're like, I can see the color scheme like being the same place, but
Yeah.
honestly, I was like, how many apartments does this guy have access to? Because like again,
Yeah.
and I think looking at it a couple of times now, I guess you deliberately seem to use a lot of close-up shots, which does distract from
Yes.
the background. But it's just clever filmmaking, man.
Yeah,
Like,
thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah.
And that's what I feel. Not only was it like a technical thing, like trying to get close to them so people don't notice the same things, but
Mm,
also, I just really love like a documentary style, intimate style of filmmaking. And, I think maybe Requiem for a Dream is a bit more stylized, but if you look at
mm,
like The Wrestler, which is like a later
yes.
Aronofsky movie, that's very intimate, that's very handheld, that's very
Mm.
close up. And a lot of Sean Baker's work as well, who I cite as a major influence on me. A lot of his work is also like very close up and documentary like.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, the documentary style, because I was sitting there watching it last night and I didn't pick up on it the first time. The first time I was just kind of letting it wash over me. But yesterday when I was watching it, there are a couple of scenes, particularly between Chester and Cynthia, and I was like, oh my God, it feels like this guy just turned on a camera and walked away. And by that I don't mean stop paying attention to his film.
Yeah,
I
no.
mean literally was like, these are real people, just let them talk and they'll tell the story for me. Like it does feel very
Yeah.
documentary style. And one film that I'm like The Wrestler is such an interesting film for you to cite because now that you say that,
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my God, it does feel like
I
that.
love The Wrestler. That's one of my
Um,
favorite films.
but the film that it reminded me of quite a bit, particularly the relationship between the characters, was Sid and Nancy. I don't know if you've seen that film from
I haven't seen that, no. That's
with
with Gary Oldman, right?
yeah, absolutely, because that's obviously the story of Sid Vicious and his relationship, not
Yeah.
just with drugs, but with his kind of his love interest as well, and just the way that
Yeah.
your characters play off each other felt very similar.
Well, thank
So
you.
so that was quite cool. I was like, oh my goodness, this is like Sid and Nancy, like. Um, so nice one. Um, it's an incredible film, and I really want to talk about it. But let's talk
Thank
about
you.
you a little bit first.
Sure.
Um, you're in New York, young filmmaker. Where does it begin for you? Have you been a lifelong film fan? Is it something that came to you later in life? Like, where does that journey begin for you?
I always find myself, like saying something similar to what I'm about to say, but
Yep.
it really has been a gradual process throughout my entire life of making things. And specifically, I have to cite my origins from the machinima scene. And if in case anyone who's listening is unfamiliar with machinima, which I'm sure you guys are,
Yeah.
machinima is this sort of niche form of animated filmmaking. And
Yep.
you're essentially making animated characters within like a video game engine move and move their mouths and have actions, and then you get voice actors, and then you cut, you get lighting. An entire filmmaking process through a computer screen.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel I hopefully learned my X's and O's of filmmaking,
Mm.
and I've been doing that since I was a very, very young age. I mean, obviously, as I got older, I got a little better at it, but I can cite. When I was around 9 or 10 years old, I was making those things. Have I had like other ambitions? Of course. Most kids do. Most kids want to be a policeman or an astronaut or whatever. I wanted to be an MMA fighter. That was a
Wow.
crazy little time period. Yeah, it's a
I've
crazy
I've seen you in
pipeline.
that flick. I believe it. Like,
No, but and throughout that entire process of growing up and trying to find what I like and what I want to be when I grow older, filmmaking has always stuck with me.
Mm.
And I also have to cite my parents as well, who are constantly watching movies and shows, and getting to sit with them and watch a movie and stuff. And I was raised on like Martin Scorsese and Goodfellas and Casino and the Godfather trilogy. Not only because I'm Italian and living in New York, but also because that's just what my that's just what my parents kind of raised me on. That's what I grew up watching and wanting to see more of. And so, again, it was just sort of a gradual process from a very young age.
Fantastic. It's so interesting. Like normally when I ask people about their journey, like they always start about the movies they watch, but you were creating like at a young age. Like you were,
Yeah.
which is so cool. I remember like my own journey, like when I was young, anytime we got a school assignment, we were like, how can we turn this into a movie? And we just got the video camera out and we filmed the assignment. So that's really, really cool. Um, Scorsese as a child, man, that's an interesting choice.
Yeah, yeah. I had a lot of freedom as a young child to play GTA and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
Martin Scorsese's movies, were like a part of my household. That was
Yeah.
just a tradition that we did, that we watched.
That's awesome, man. Um, and now I don't know how old you are. Like, I know you're a little bit younger
I'm
than me.
19. I was
Oh,
18 when I made the movie.
oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Wow, you are young. Okay. I was gonna say, is the video store like, we often talk about growing up, is the video store part of your childhood? But video stores even around when you were old enough to start
No,
watching movies?
no, they weren't. No, Blockbuster, I think, went defunct like right around the time I started becoming like aware of my surroundings as like a 4-year-old. So,
Okay, fair enough. Sorry, you just blown my mind. I didn't do that much research. I
oh,
didn't
thank you. I
like that
appreciate
just
that.
that just makes everything you've done far more impressive. I don't know why. It should have, but
Thank
jeez.
you.
Um, all right. Okay, sorry. I've literally had my mind blown
Ah,
for
that's
a
okay. No worries. I
Um,
appreciate that.
fantastic. Because the next question was be like, so what happens when you go to school, but you've just finished school? Are you like, do you follow up on and start studying film at school? Are you doing it independently at school? Like, what's that
Yeah.
journey like for you?
So, I was working on this, dating back to last year, like when I finished high school.
Mm,
I was working on this like short film. This, I think that was a more amateur attempt at filmmaking that was like, getting my feet wet.
mm,
And then, once that was done and summer came, I started developing EdgeX,
mm.
and that was a pretty big leap to go from high school and a short film to a feature film outside of high school.
Yeah. Oh,
But,
absolutely. That like
yeah,
that is the dream. Like,
yeah. Well, again, I had so many great people around me and so many great people that really believed in what we were trying to do. So I think it was more of a collaborative effort. But with that
yeah.
said, um, we got right into it, and we took, about close to a year to make the movie, right? Like throughout my entire first year out of high school, and now this is my second year. And and the movie came out a couple months ago. Do I plan on going to film school? I would like to, but I also really enjoy the freedom that I have in making the movies I can make right now.
Mm,
And I think, I don't like to knock on anyone who chooses to go to film school, but for me, I think getting a numerical grade and being valued on something that you made and that you wanted to make, I don't really like that.
oh, you
So
come to the
that's
right place, man.
yeah. And I mean, I get that like that's how teachers teach, is by giving you a grade, right? A numerical value on your assignment.
Mm.
But like if I want to make a movie, if I want to make something, I don't want to have to deal with that. I just want to make what I want to make. So yeah, that's my stance on film school as of now.
I agree with you, man. It's like You're absolutely, and that's why I'm not a big fan of critics, which is funny because I've got a lot of critic
Yeah.
friends. But it's you're like, how do you like actually? And Colin Farrell talked about it just recently at the Golden Globes. He's like, what we do is unquantifiable, and he's absolutely right. Like, how do you give a score to Quentin Tarantino? How do you give a
Yeah.
score? Do you know what I mean? And I'm not anti-film school, but I believe what you're saying as well. Like all of my favorite filmmakers never went to film school.
Yeah.
Like I like Quentin Tarantino didn't go to film school. Rodriguez didn't go to film school. Kevin Smith went to film school for a semester and dropped out. So I would say it
Yeah.
doesn't really count.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think I've seen the flick you made, man. You don't need to. Like look, you know how to
Thank
make a
you.
movie. Like they teach you how to make a film. You've already made one, so like you've done
Thank you.
your
I
film school.
appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, I think I've been, this is going to sound a little corny, but I feel like I've been going to film school all of my life, essentially, because I've
Mm,
been working on the X's and O's of how to edit, right? How to do lighting, how to compose your shots. And I've been doing
mm,
that within the machinima format. And I think a big thing about film school is they're not going to elevate what you already have internally, right? As a talent, as a vision, as
mm,
a passion. They're not going to elevate that. They're going to show you how to pick up a camera, how to turn on your lights, and how to edit. Again,
mm,
I'm not like anti film school, believe me, but I think film school, a major positive aspect of film school is the networking part
mhm.
of it. And I feel like that's potentially what I'm missing out on. But as far as like the technical side of it, I've been trying to learn all of my life and I'm still learning and I'm still going to be learning for however long I want to make movies.
Yeah, nice. Did it ever cross your mind to enter EdgeX into the festival circuit? Like it's got festival written all over him now. This is the kind of things that would
Thank
snap
you.
up. Like, has
I
that been?
appreciate that.
Because I know you've done the YouTube release. Well, like, did you try to release it that way, or did you try to reach out, or were you just more like, I just want to get it out there, and then I'll deal with that stuff later?
There was a few festivals, a few small festivals around New York that we were privileged enough to screen at before the release in November. But I think there were also a good amount of festivals that turned us down, actually.
Okay,
And I can imagine that, a 2 hour movie about kids doing, heroin is maybe not the most appropriate festival thing to them. And I do think the runtime also affected that greatly. But hey,
sure.
you live and you learn.
I mean, and Nora just won Best Picture, and I would never consider that an Oscar film. Not because it's
Yeah.
not well made, but like that is a filthy film. Like,
Yeah, yeah, it is certainly volatile for sure.
yeah. Um, so I'm interested. I'm fascinated by the title as well. EdgeX. Like it's when I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, is this a sci-fi thing?" Like the X really kind of threw it. So where does the title come from? Is it just like obviously it's a very pardon the pun, but it is a very edgy story. Like we are I guess looking at these characters who live on the fringes, live on the edge. So is that what influenced the title? Like, and where does the X come from? I'm just fascinated by it because I've never seen a title
Yeah,
quite like it.
absolutely. Well, I think a lot of the characters are quite literally on edge,
Hmm.
so to speak. And I think the X, I think now we associate X with like Twitter, but
Yeah, sure.
yeah, formerly though, I always like thought of X as like an unknown symbol, right? A symbol of
Mm,
the unknown. And I feel like a lot of these characters, I think they're, unknowing to themselves. I
mm.
feel like there's a lot that they're trying to figure out about themselves. And, I think EdgeX, I just thought it kind of sounded cool. So
Yeah. No, it does. It does absolutely. I was just fascinated because I've never seen anything quite like it. I was like, man, that's such a bold title. Like, I want to know more about that.
yeah.
Um, all right. So you put your script together, and then obviously the next. I imagine one of the next steps is casting. You've talked about the somewhat controversial nature of the film. It's definitely not going to be something for everyone. It's very heavy on the drug use and drug themes. It's a
Yeah.
two-hour flick, which you probably didn't know was going to be 2 hours at the time. Maybe you did, but whenever
No,
I write
I
stuff, I
did
have no
not.
idea how long it's going to be. So,
Yeah.
what's that casting process, and is it something that you get like are people jumping on straight away? Is it something that people are kind of scared of when they first read the script? What was that whole process like?
Well, that's a great question because, again, I had a lot of help from the two leads of the film,
Mm,
Randall Krauss and Cade Meyer. They were a huge help in bringing a lot of their friends on and their people on because they were local actors. Everyone that you see in the film is local to
yeah.
my area. So, it was really a community effort. And, they were really crucial in recruiting some of these people, and now I've made lifelong friends with these people.
Mm,
So it was a really great experience, not only casting, but getting to just meet new people, getting to meet new artists. As far as like the actual like auditioning process, when, we held in-person auditions and we held virtual auditions, like, sending in a self-tape,
hmm
and it was cool. It was a cool experience. I think there were definitely a good amount of people that read the script and was like, "Yeah, like this is just too much." Especially for the part of Cynthia, which is played by Ali Tatillo. There was a good amount of people who said, "Hey, listen, this part is just a lot. It's just
mm.
very, very draining," and rightfully so. I think it's a very challenging part. I think all of these characters are very challenging, to try and capture. It's a challenging lifestyle, and if someone wasn't mentally prepared to try and handle that, then we'd want to move on. So, but all in all, though, it was a really great time, and I met so many amazing people from it.
Fantastic. I'm so glad you
Yeah.
said it was a great time. I'm sure it was, but like again, watching it,
Yeah.
it's always interesting that you watch behind the scenes footage of the most dark, decrepit films, and those are the ones people are
Yeah.
having the most fun on. Like
Yeah.
every now and then, essentially, I don't think the people on Martyrs had that much fun, but there are most people seem to have fun on those darker ones.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I'm really fascinated by in the film is the choice of music. Um,
Hmm.
Particularly, I would say in the third act, there's a moment, and we can kind of see Chester's at this turning point, and there are a couple times that we actually get to see him play guitar as well. But the
Hmm.
juxtaposition is really interesting because you've got him playing these really quite sweet melodies, and then it cuts to Cynthia, and she's not having such a great time. What was the decision making process there, and was it kind of this deliberate uneasy feeling you were going for, or kind of how did that come about?
Well, that's the way I wrote it. So it was always intended to try and contrast the two characters.
Mm,
And also, most of the score was composed by our great composer, Dina Mendello. But for the guitar tracks that you hear in the film, especially the ones where Chester is playing, that's all overdubbed by our guitar guy, Jack Bergen, who's just this really talented musician that I know and that
mm,
I'm good friends with. And so, with that said, I think it was always nice to try and contrast characters every time we see them, not even just pertaining to that scene specifically, but throughout the film. I wanted to try and make every scene count, every scene matter,
mm.
and every scene, every character, right? The three main characters, Cynthia, Jimmy, and Chester. I wanted people to pick a side, and to force them to pick a side, to force audiences to try and pay attention to these characters. I think it was always important to try and make them a little different from one another.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and you can see that. Like it definitely is three stories, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. You deliberately wanted to kind of make every scene matter because I don't think anyone goes into a film being like, this will be a filler scene. But you definitely have seen films where you're like, there's a little bit of fat you can trim. And when I first saw the flick and seeing it was over 2 hours, I was like, wow, like I'm like there's an independent film, debut film, 2 hours. Like, part of you is always concerned, like, oh, like, are they just kind of being
Yes, of
indulgent? But
course.
every scene matters. Like, you're right, every scene matters. Like, I couldn't think of a single thing to cut from that flick. Like, it's pretty lean for 2 hours, and it moves quite quickly.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate that. I'm also a huge television fan as well. I love TV shows. So when I write and when I try and make a film, I always like to try and write about different characters and different plot lines. And obviously, for a movie, sometimes that doesn't always work in your favor because people don't want to sit, in a theater for 3 hours. But at the same time, with a film like EdgeX, I think it works quite well, because it revolves around addiction.
yeah. No, absolutely. I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, it's it moves quickly, but you feel it. And I think I said to you even before we started recording, I'm like, man, like it's a tough film to watch, and not because it's poorly made, like it's wonderfully made, but like it just, like at least to me, it just connected on such a deep level. I just felt like every emotional beat, and I felt like every time I like watch it, like both times I watched it, I feel exhausted afterwards because it's asking so much of its
Hmm.
audience, and it's not afraid to be raw. And you do a really wonderful job of going to such dark and raw places without showing a lot.
Hmm.
And I know that, like with this particular subject matter, I think there's always the temptation to just show everything. So
Yeah.
when it came to making the film, was that just based on limitations? Was it a conscious decision? Was it through kind of consultation with your actors? Like, where did the decision making process come from to be like, hey, we don't need to show everything? And like, you do show a few things. Like, there's needles
Yeah.
going in and stuff. But was it always a less is more approach, or where did that come from?
Well, I do definitely side with the idea that less is more, and also I like the saying "show don't tell,"
Mm,
and I think a major flaw of like independent low budget films is trying to show too much. I
mm,
think the most successful, to me, the most successful very tiny budget independent films, I think they excel because they're not trying to, read the entire script to the audience, right? They're trying
mm,
to show the evolution of the characters and the story, and that's what I tried doing with EdgeX. I didn't want to, like you said, overindulge the audience with every little thing. I wanted to show the essential parts of the story, and I think it also helped that the story jumps between, a night at the sponsor's house and then, a couple weeks chronicling this guy's addiction.
mm.
So I think the benefit of jumping between those 2 points also helped us kind of bounce around a bit and not have to show a whole lot.
Yeah. Um, and you're so like it makes sense that show no tell is so important to you because on my second watch, as I mentioned to you before, like sadly YouTube is not always is so generous with the
Yeah.
subtitles. It mix things up a little bit, but
That's okay.
that's one of the reasons why I wanted to watch it the second time to make sure I didn't miss anything. And I mean this in the most respectful and kind of positive way. I could watch that flick without dialogue and it works. Like you
Thank
do
you.
such a
I
wonderful
appreciate
job
that.
of showing like it's such a well executed story, and I don't think it's necessarily a simple story. Like people would say, "Oh, well, if you can tell without dialogue, it's probably pretty simple." But no, I don't think so. I think it's quite complex. But there's such deliberate use of visuals and the way you kind of show things and the pacing of it.
Thank
I
you.
think if I wouldn't want to mute it because I love that music so much. But if there was no dialogue, I'd be like, "No, I get that. I know exactly what's going on.
Hmm.
I know what
Thank
this
you so
character's
much.
motivation." Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very, very visual, which is wonderful. Um, all right, this is probably the first question that came to my mind, and I was like, "Do I ask this question?" But
Sure.
you were like, "Hey, there's no there's no limits," because obviously one of the biggest rules of writing is write what you know, which I don't like that rule by
Sure.
the way, because
Sure.
I don't think the Russos have been to space and fought Thanos. I think it's impossible to write what we know all the time, but
Yes, I agree.
it feels like such a personal story. It feels like it comes from this place of um, it's just like this darkness within. So where does the idea come from? Is this something that you like, without incriminating you? Is this
Yeah.
something that you've seen in your life? Have you had friends who've gone through this, or is it just like,
Sure.
hey, I tend to like stories about the dark side of life, and I just thought I'd take a swing at it. Like, is it
Yeah.
as personal story as it feels, or is it just a movie?
Well, I'm certainly not running around doing heroin, so I can
Mm,
start off with
I didn't think you
that.
were, but good.
But I also think that, like, before I really get into what you're trying to ask, I think that a lot of the time, like, in film school, especially when you work on these, short films, there's a lot of emotional weight that young filmmakers my age,
Mm,
are trying to make the audience process in a
mm,
relatively short time. And I think a lot of the troubling things that you see in the movie, I think they work well because of the runtime. And with that said, why I chose to make this film containing so many troubling things is because I think being a young person, it was fitting for me to make a movie about young people because that's something
mm,
I feel like I do know.
sure.
um, and also, I feel that a lot of the philosophies that the characters share in the film about themselves, that's stuff that I do relate to, like, directly. Like a lot of the stuff that Chester says in his sponsor sessions about himself.
Mm,
And Jimmy's need to try and feel like a good person, those are all things I do directly relate to, and then I did
sure.
write, from my perspective, almost journaling myself, my thoughts into these characters. But with that said, though, I also think that a lot of what you see from the characters in the film are coming from the actors, and they're
Hmm.
channeling that, especially from the roles of Cynthia and Chester. I think, Kate and Allie, I think they really put a lot of themselves into what they were trying to achieve with those roles. And, specifically with Allie, who is my scene partner in most, if not all of my scenes, there was a genuinely a really thorough process that her and I both went through on our own, and stuff that we talked about together, where we had to go and reach into really dark places inside of ourselves to get into that character, and talk like that, and say all these really nasty things and do these nasty things.
Hmm.
But to answer your question, though, again, philosophies are very direct. As far as the addiction goes, I feel like addiction is a really universal subject for all of us, no matter who you are, no matter what age you are. And I feel like I've had a really good, I think I've had an opportunity previously to see that firsthand from people that I've been close to, and people that maybe haven't been close to. So that's my answer to the question.
No, that's like I was literally sitting at the edge of my seat, just taking it all in. I was just like, oh my god, like
Yeah.
what a wonderful answer. And I guess like the point that I was trying to make is not are you doing drugs? It was more it just feels so authentic, you know.
Yeah, I
Um,
appreciate
and
that.
it comes back to that documentary style we are talking about before. Like, even though yes, it is a low budget film, and yes, using local actors and stuff like that, because that's the kind of thing I think is very easy for general audiences to write off. Like it's like, oh well,
Yes.
it doesn't have a star in it, look at it, but it just feels so authentic. It just
Thank
feels,
you. I
and
appreciate
you
that.
talking about the process that the actors went through and like finding that darkness and just you're right. Addiction is universal. Like
Yeah,
I can't tell you how
absolutely.
many times I pull that goddamn rectangle out of my pocket every single day.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
for no reason other than to just check. Do you know what I mean? Oh,
Yeah.
it's still there. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's just fascinating because
Thank
yeah,
you.
when I studied films, well, when I studied film, you were just born. That's how long ago it was. I was 18 when I studied film,
Yeah.
which was about 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and they were very big on write what you know, and they're like, don't write about stuff you have no. Don't write about the world of drugs. It'll never come across as authentic. And that was a
Sure.
rule that's very antiquated. It's a very antiquated rule.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it until sitting down there. I'm like, and I didn't know you were as young as you are. But I was
Thank
like,
you.
but I knew you were like, you were definitely younger than me. I'm like, there's no way
Sure.
like this guy's there. Like unless he has, but I just don't think he's lived in the world of drugs like this. But it comes off as so realistic,
Thank
and
you. I
those
appreciate
characters
that.
feel really real. Let's talk about you in the film because
Sure.
obviously all the performances are wonderful. The guy who plays Chester, like he really is. I was gonna say he's our hero. He's not that heroic. He definitely makes
Yeah,
some terrible
he's
decisions.
kind of a bad person.
They're all kind of bad, but I think like
Yes.
the three of them, like Jimmy, Cynthia, and Chester, at least all have this kind of redeeming quality. They don't want to be
Yes.
where they are. They're
Yes.
definitely trying to get out of it in different ways. And poor Cynthia, I think, cops it the worst. She definitely, well, there's a scene towards the end that Jimmy, I think, definitely has the worst of it. But Cynthia,
Yeah.
from an emotional point of view, like she just cops a beating. Like there's no moments of
Yeah.
happiness for that character. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of which sadly comes from you and your character.
Yeah.
Like I think you're a fantastic actor. So my
Thank
question
you. I
is
appreciate that a lot. That means a
my
lot.
my question is, did you come from an acting background as well, or is it just look? I'm making it. I need a guy. I'll be the guy. I'll play the bad guy, so no one feels bad for doing it. Like, where does that decision come from?
It was part like the latter of your question. Definitely it was like, what? I think I should step into this role because I don't know. Number one, as a director and a writer, I don't know if I can pull this darkness out of someone that I know.
Mm,
And number two, I also just didn't know if like the responsibility of that character should be laid upon someone else. With that
mm,
said, though, I don't really come from an acting background. I acted in my own short film that I mentioned before that I did in high school, and that was like my first real taste of acting. But with that said, I do love and admire acting, and I do actively try and study acting and actors and I mean, I'm a huge James Dean fan, and I think
mm.
the emotion that he shows in his face, throughout his scenes and his, 3 movies that he did, I think that's something that I was definitely actively looking to in my own scenes. Trying to convey stuff through not only what I'm saying but how I'm feeling physically.
Mm. That's fascinating to me that you. consider yourself as someone with very little acting background, because there's such this raw, natural ability on screen. Like whenever you're on screen, like as I said, like that's when I was most scared watching the film. Like that you just there's this presence you bring, and it's like this. It's this silent rage, but also sometimes not so silent rage, where sometimes it
Yeah.
gets quite. And like if I think back to like movie villains, I said to you like it feels like a horror film. Like it's not a horror film. Like it's this kind of
Yeah.
this teen drama about addiction. But when it goes into those dark places, it transcends that genre and goes into areas of horror. And it makes me think of how I felt when I watched J.K. Simmons in Whiplash. Like that's not a horror
Yeah.
film, but that is a terrifying character.
It
Like I
is
would
it
never
is a
want.
terrifying performance. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so just like and getting like flashes of that in this like little YouTube film that I hadn't heard of, like was such a joy. Like terrifying, but such a joy to me.
Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate that. That means a lot.
oh, it was just wonderful to watch, and that's not to cast a shadow on anyone else. I think all the
Of
performances are
course.
excellent.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, I don't really have a question there. I just want to say it was great, to be
Yeah, thank you. I
honest.
appreciate that. It was such a really troubling process and a really just like disgusting process physically, mentally. I mean, not only do we all look really gross in the movie, and that's credit to our incredible makeup artist, Demi Pateris.
Yeah.
So not only when I have all that makeup on and these dirty, raggedy clothes that we messed up for the purpose of the film, not only do I feel really bad about myself, but also like, having to portray that, having to do these things and say those things, that made me feel even worse about myself, and at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's just acting, but I also am a human and I do feel responsible to my emotions, and having to do that take after take after take, and also having written the material and having knowing these characters inside and out, it doesn't really allow me any room for peace inside my head, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, after the film, and then, I'd have to go home and edit, and I have to rewatch that over and over and over.
Mm.
It was just very emotionally draining. And again, luckily, we had such a great group of people around me, and my scene partner, Allie, was great. And just everyone there made me feel a lot better about myself.
Mm.
But, honestly, I did, and I'm actively in therapy in part because of that experience, because of that role.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is you hear actors talk about the process and how like I lived with that character for 6 months and never again. And I was like, but to know that like it's impacted you on such a deep and personal level, like even now, like when did the film released in November? How long ago did you wrap shooting?
Well, we wrapped shooting, I think, around early February last year,
Wow.
and I don't really feel any connection to that character anymore, thankfully.
Mm.
But for the better part of that spring, and especially when we were filming, during that fall and winter,
Mm.
I was incredibly wrapped up in the
Yeah.
troubling nature of that character. And I talked to actors, who were part of the film, and I said like, hey, is this normal? Like, do you guys always feel like this? And some of them said like, hey, listen, you learn to let go. The more you do
Mm.
this, you learn to let go. But for me, I felt so in tune with all of these really disturbing emotions, to the point where like that was just me channeling this rage and this emptiness. That was me trying to get into this character, and it was just really hard to step aside from that.
Wow, that's fascinating. Again, like, and only because I think I'm more fascinated simply because you say you don't have an acting background, and like to know that just this role, again, this role terrified me, so I get it. But like that it lived
Thank
with you for
you.
so long, and you had to kind of unpack it through therapy and stuff. I'm really glad to jump topics. I'm really glad you brought up the makeup because it's so effective in this flick. Like
Yeah.
it's um, I'll be honest, like being perfectly honest with you, when the first scene started and I saw her wearing the pink wig, I didn't realize it was a character choice. I should have given the film more credit. And I was like, I was like, that is. I was like,
Yes,
"Oh,
it
that's
was a
quite a.
character
I was like, that's
choice.
quite a cheap wig. Okay, like, well, like that's okay, that's fine. And then like the next scene, she's got different color hair again, and then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I mean, so it only took me, but at first I was like, oh, I hope like like they spent the money on the makeup, but and then I started seeing, the use of it, and like you all look grimy, you all look
Thank you.
sweaty, you all
Yeah,
look um
absolutely.
and again like and I guess you can comment to this whether I'm true or not, but it felt very much again a less is more approach
Hmm.
where
Yeah.
it's quite subtle. Like, it like to the point where you're like, oh, I just think, Chester hasn't had enough sleep. Like, but realistically, I think it does seem like it's a makeup choice.
Yeah, well, again, all credit goes to our fabulous makeup artist, Demi Pateras, who just did, again, a fabulous job
Mm.
doing this incredible work. I mean, I can't say enough good things about her work, and she really helped make this movie. And yeah, I've said repeatedly I couldn't make this movie without the makeup she did, because
Mm.
it really sells it. It sells the characters, and as you said, it adds to the documentary aspect of like, oh wait, am I watching something that's kind of real here? And I really, again, I think all of that goes to the credit of our makeup artist.
You're very good at giving credit to everyone but yourself. You're very
Well,
good at
listen,
passing that.
it's a group effort.
Of
No one
course.
can make a movie, especially like a 2 hour feature film. No one can do that by themselves, and I certainly didn't do it by myself, and I couldn't do it by myself. So it's always I do feel responsible to highlight all of these really wonderful people we had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's very humbling to hear. It's very lovely to hear like you give everyone their dues
Yeah,
and stuff like that. What's the response been like? Because when I went on, it's had about 30,000 views on YouTube, which blew like
yeah.
I was again like
It blew my
stunned.
mind
It's
too.
amazing. Like again, I know we're pushing this point a lot to people listening. That I know we're pushing it. Like, it's 2 hours. Like I don't know YouTube is the thing that people watch these days. I'm not really a YouTube guy. I still collect physical media.
Yeah,
A bit of a
me
grandpa,
too.
but but the idea of sitting down and watching it on YouTube for 2 hours was scary to me. I'm like, oh my god, I gotta sit down and watch YouTube for 2 hours. But it's had 30,000 views, which is insane. So what
Yeah,
has the response been like from, and not just from obviously the general audience is
of
wonderful, but
course.
even from people close to you, mentors and stuff like that. Like, what has the reaction been to this film?
Well, number one, we got extremely lucky with the algorithm of YouTube, and there is like a film community on YouTube. People do post their movies on there. But with that said, the first week of the film being on YouTube, we only managed to get about 1,000 views, which is what I was expecting, and I was very grateful for that. But then, like a week later, it started getting more, and it started getting more, like like 200 a day, 300 a day, 400 a day. I'm like, okay, and then that went on for a good month and a half, and every week that passed, my girlfriend Bree would be like, "Hey, it's gonna get more, it's gonna get more," and it kept getting more, So I said to her, I'm like, "Hey, you're like my good luck charm," and it really did keep growing and growing and growing, and I'm able to look at the stats on YouTube and I'm able to see that, oh, okay, got like 12,000 views from people clicking on this video, like and the recommended of that video, and got another 2,000 views from being under this video. So we got extremely lucky, and I'm extremely happy that people were able to see it. So many people were able to see it. As far as the reception goes, we had an in-person premiere at a local movie theater, and we managed to sell
Oh,
that out. We had
nice.
so many great people there, and the reception has been really overwhelming. Even from people I don't know, people who have come up to me after seeing it at a screening and saying, "Thank you for making that." I can relate to that. I have someone that can relate to that in my family. That has meant the world to us, to all of us, and it's been very overwhelming. I'm extremely grateful for anyone who just wants to sit down and watch it, let alone if they enjoy it. Anyone who sits down for 2 hours and wants to watch something you made, that's what matters to me. And the fact that so many people have chosen to do that and have enjoyed it, I can't say enough how happy I am about that.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's like there are times where I've had moments in my life where I'll go and look at my collection of movies, and I'll be like, I was wasting my time.
Yeah.
Like what am I doing? Like, should I have pursued something different? I talk about this quite a bit on the show, but ultimately the answer is no, because the way that I connect with the world is through art.
Yeah,
And
absolutely, man.
film, I think, gets a bit of a. I think people kind of trivialize it quite a bit because it is so digestible, because it is so
Yeah.
consumable. You can just sit down passively for 2 hours or whatever the case may be and move on. People kind of dismiss it as not being on the same level as something in a gallery. Um, but
Hmm.
my argument about film is that it's the tool in which I communicate with the world. Without film, I think I would really struggle to navigate the world.
I
So
feel the same way.
so hearing people respond to your movie in these wonderful ways like, validates that feeling for me. And it's not all about me,
Yeah.
JR. It's not just about me here at the show. It's about you as
Absolutely.
well. But
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
validates
absolutely.
that feeling, and
I
I
appreciate that though.
I love that you're connecting with people and people are connecting to the material. I certainly connected with it, and I'm someone
Thank
who
you.
fortunately I've never had any experience with with
Yeah.
drugs or known anyone with kind
Yeah.
of. But I have, I talked about before, the rectangle in my pocket. I do know what it's like to be addicted to
Hmm.
something, even if you're not willing
Yeah.
to admit it sometimes. Some
Yeah. I
might
think
argue
we're
I'm
all
addicted
we're all
to,
addicted to that.
yeah, I think some might argue I'm addicted to films, like the amount I watch each year.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but I've never given that up. Um, but um, it's just wonderful to hear all that. So I guess like my question is, you've had this positive reception. People are talking about you and your film.
Yeah.
You seem very indie film for life for me, but have there been conversations? Have people kind of acknowledged the presence of the film, and have there been talks about the next one?
That's a really good question. Really quick, as far as physical media goes, there is going to be an EdgeX DVD release at some point
Oh, I
soon.
was going to
So
ask
if you're
about that as well.
interested, yes,
Yeah.
I will send you a copy. I will mail it to you once I
Oh my
have
god,
them.
I'm happy to throw
Um,
down my money for it. It's a wonderful movie as well.
no, I appreciate that, but no. But as far as what's next, I've been pretty tight-lipped about that.
Mm,
But what I can say is, absolutely, there's something coming next, and that's already been, in development. It's very far along in development. I think it'll be a good amount of time before it sees the light of day, but there is something that's coming next. Again, still heavily inspired by what I'm trying to do,
mm.
or that what I try to do with EdgeX, and it's heavily inspired by the likes of like Dallas Buyers Club and some other Sean Baker films as well.
Oh
He
wow.
didn't direct Dallas Buyers Club, but yeah, it's gonna be cool. I think it's a very human story.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Yes, we know Dallas Buyers Club is not directed by Sean
Yeah,
Baker because he didn't use that font. He uses that
yeah,
font in every movie poster. Well, let's talk about Baker for a second. He just won the Oscar, rightfully so.
yes. He
Um,
won the
and
most Oscars in a single night. That's insane.
and it was funny, like when I saw them come through, I did think of you because I'm talking to this independent filmmaker, and surely like
Yeah,
this message
thank
he's
you.
giving out be must be somewhat meaningful to you as well. And then I saw you
Yes.
posting about it, so. Um, what a triumph for independent film. Is he someone whose career you're trying to model yourself after? Is it just you like a couple of the flicks and you want to kind of do the same like similar
Well,
storytelling, or what's
yeah.
the connection there?
Well, I think it's always going to be hard to model your career after someone else's, and that's because the industry is so rapidly changing.
Mm,
And 30 years ago, it was a hell of a lot easier to get an independent film financed, and as of
yeah.
now, I'm having to do that myself. With the money I have in my little piggy bank. So, but yeah, it's hard because Sean Baker is 50 years old, believe it or not. I thought he was in his
Oh
late 30s, but
wow.
no, yeah, he's 50 years
I
old.
thought he was
And
like he's not that much older than me. He looks a lot better than I do. Um,
and he's been making movies for 20 years, and I've watched
yeah.
every feature film of his. He's been making movies for 20 years. And that's what it takes. It takes 20 years. It takes a
Mm,
long time to learn and to get support, and sometimes most of the time you don't even get that. Sometimes you don't even get recognized. There's plenty of other great independent filmmakers like Sean Baker that are out there probably that haven't seen the light of day. So no, I'm not trying to actively model my career after him. Is he a major inspiration, like both technically speaking and filmmaking wise? Yes. But I'm trying to be me. I'm trying to make my movies, and I certainly do look at someone like Sean Baker as an inspiration and as sort of like my filmmaking hero. So, I think the big thing about Sean Baker is he has always been true to who he is as an artist. He has always tried to make films about challenging topics and marginalized groups of people and people who maybe kind of are flawed in many ways. That's the type of stories that I want to tell.
mm.
So to answer your question, heavily inspired by him, but I have my own path to try and walk too.
That's a great answer. That's a
Thank
really
you.
good answer. And
Thank
of
you.
course, you want to blaze your own trail, and you seem to be doing so because I've never seen anything like your movie. I've never
Thank you.
seen
I
anything.
appreciate that.
I talked about before hints of Requiem, obviously, and hints of Sid and Nancy, but nothing looks quite like yours. So you're definitely already starting to model your own distinctive style. You
Thank
talked
you.
about the challenges of making an indie film these days, and it is interesting because I'm but I'm an aspiring filmmaker as well. I still haven't,
Awesome.
done
Hell
done anything
yeah.
done anything with it. But
That's okay.
one thing that seems different now compared to 20, because I was around 20 years ago. I wanted to make films 20 years ago as well. The one thing that I
Yeah.
think we have on our side now is the evolution of technology. But
Absolutely.
I do feel like it's harder to get like not just getting it funded, but I think it's hard to get an audience now because
Yeah.
there's so much content. Everyone's an indie
Yes.
filmmaker. So how
Yep.
do you
Absolutely.
reckon, like, what are the biggest challenges as an independent filmmaker for you, and how do you reckon with those?
Well, that's a really good question, and I appreciate you asking that. I was actually talking to my dad, who's a big supporter of mine. He's,
Fantastic.
my top two big supporter aside from my girlfriend. So, but with that said, I was talking to him about this the other day, and I said I'm kind of living in like a paradox effect almost because it's easier than ever now to try and make a quality movie with the equipment that I have access to and that we all have access to. However, it's harder than ever to actually get recognized and get financed, and in the 90s, if you had a plan, if you had a vision, and if knew a couple people, you had a pretty good shot at getting a producer to come on and give you a couple $100,000 or give you $1 million.
Mm,
Now I think that's a lot harder, and I think there's a lot less risk that is being taken on independent films. And when you look at someone again like Sean Baker, Nora was made on a $6 million budget. Now, that's his most expensive movie to date. But the guy has been making quality movies for 20 years on incredibly low budgets. Like, he started out financing his own films.
mm,
So, to answer your question, though, I think it's a progression, and it's more of less, play it by ear and just do what I can do now. Make the movies that I can make now. And if I get privileged enough to meet some cool people along the way to help finance this, then awesome. But otherwise, I'm just trying to tell the stories that I need to tell right now.
yeah, absolutely. And for those wondering who are like $6 million is a lot of money. No, I didn't film. It's not $6 million.
Yeah.
Like, no, I didn't film.
Especially in New York City too. I mean, they actually
Yeah.
did shoot that, like, in Manhattan and Brooklyn. That's not easy. That's not cheap.
No, absolutely. I remember, yeah, like that was the model that Blumhouse used to have, and they've obviously destroyed that
Yeah,
model now. But
yeah.
their whole thing was no more than $4 million. Our budget's $4 million, and we bring experienced filmmakers in, and that's how you do it. And then they got a lot of success. Like, $15 million,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
like it did blow up. But
Yeah, well, I will always stay independent, and maybe I'll be forced to always stay independent, but I can't sit here and pretend that there's, someone waiting at the end of the line to give me a blank check,
Mm,
or any of us a blank check, because again, that's just incredibly hard. And I think it's going to get harder, especially because of a lack of, back end. That was a major thing that Sean Baker talks about now, is,
mm,
and a lot of other filmmakers too. There's no DVD sales, there's no back end sales, there's no way to recoup the money that you may lose going, putting it in theaters. So
yeah.
that's also why it's very hard to get financed. So like I said, the only thing I can do is just make the movies that I can make with the budget that I have.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's your opinion tying into that? Because you mentioned no DVD sales, which of course breaks my heart. Because
Hmm.
I grew up in video stores, I worked in video stores, I've been collecting forever. Um,
Yeah.
what is your opinion on something like streaming? Because if people who listen to my show know I have very strong opinions about streaming, I think it's a good tool that has been misused greatly.
Yeah.
So I'm not really a fan of it. I feel that it's actually probably hurting the industry more than it's helping it. But for someone like you who has
Hmm.
made this film, who didn't have a studio to be like, we'll put it out, like you use something like YouTube. What's your feeling on the streaming services? Like, is it
Hmm.
more of a tool for someone like you, or do you think it's ultimately hurting the industry?
Well, I think it's certainly hurting the industry again because of the fact that indie filmmakers such as myself, and who are older than me and have more experience than me, it's incredibly hard to find that financing because studios aren't willing to take the risk, of you not making the money back in theaters, and people aren't going to movie theaters. That's a whole nother,
Mm,
topic. But with that said, though, I mean, I'm a pro physical media guy. I can't
mm,
say that I don't indulge in streaming just because it's convenient, but I think physical media reigns supreme. I have my own nice little collection. And also, I grew up being raised on physical media. My dad,
nice.
has had a huge DVD collection. And 10 or so years ago, he sold a lot of them because he felt like, hey, it's fine. Physical media is always going to be it's always going to be cool. Just get more. But it's not in anymore. People don't really make DVDs. You really get a Blu-ray because, a movie did really well in theaters. So now that company is going to go make a Blu-ray Blu-ray or whatever. Point is, I think it's very harmful streaming.
Mm.
I think it's very scary. And honestly, I think the way that we're heading, I think streaming is just turning into cable. You know, I feel like 10 years down the line, it's going to be all bundled packages, and we're going to be
Yeah.
paying for, and we already are paying for a bundle of networks, so to
Oh yeah,
speak.
I pay
And
way more for
yeah,
my four streaming services than my parents ever paid for cable. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. I mean, my parents are huge like streaming nuts. We don't even have cable anymore. So,
Mm.
um, I think that it's scary. You know, it's uncertain. But hey, people will always try and evolve. Will always try and evolve. Indie filmmakers, people in the arts, always trying to evolve. So I guess we'll see what happens. We will see what happens.
Excellent. Yeah, I know that was a very loaded question, so thank you for
No,
indulging
that's
me.
okay.
Obviously, that's
Yeah,
a place
absolutely.
that I come from, but there are obviously other factors that are impacting. Like ticket prices aren't helping. Like I think
Yeah.
the tide turned in 2009 with Avatar. Once they realized you can
Hmm.
make $1 billion in the box office, everyone's like, well, let's do it. Let's chase $1 billion, and that's when
Yeah.
we saw your $30 million rom-coms falling away. You saw your independent films going away because everyone
Hmm.
was like, if we just chase $1 billion, we'll all be happy and rich. But they didn't realize that by jacking up the prices, less people are going. If you kept them the same amount of people would come. You'd still get your $1 billion. It might take a bit longer, but
Yeah.
everyone was still get more people coming to the theater. So it is fascinating to watch. Um, but I agree with you. It is scary, but I do think that storytelling will always prevail. I think we
Yeah,
are we are
absolutely.
creatures who crave story. We're all natural storytellers. It's the one thing that really unites us, that and death.
Yeah.
So I think we'll always have that kind of desire to hear
And
stories.
taxes too.
Taxes too. Well, let's be fair. There are some people. This is not a political podcast, but hey, we went there. Um, Fantastic, man. Well, I think that's about all the questions I had about your film. It's a wonderful film. Before we get
Yeah,
out of here,
thank you so much.
I do have a few questions I want to ask you that I ask every guest. But
Sure.
before we jump into that, is there anything else you want to tell people about the flick? Is there anything that I haven't asked that feels like we definitely need people to know about?
Um, again, thank you for having me. You can check out I Am a Teenage Film Snob on all streaming platforms to listen to the rest of the show. And if you want to check out EdgeX, you can watch it on YouTube. At my YouTube channel, it's Sid Cinematics. We also have Letterboxd as well, which I believe I sent you a link to before the show. I don't know if you use that. It's like a movie review app.
I'm very aware of Letterboxd. I haven't. I keep flirting with the idea of doing it, but maybe now, like maybe I have to just to do a review.
Thank
Because
you.
I haven't done my review for your movie yet, by the way. Like it is coming. I will
Thank
do
you.
a
I
video
appreciate
review like
that.
I always do. But I wanted to get to know you and have a chat first, and like that way,
Absolutely.
if I learned anything more, I could throw that into the review. But
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
excellent.
Well,
Well,
hey,
JR,
listen, thank
oh
you again
sorry.
for having me.
Well, before we get out of here, I've got a couple of questions I like to
Yeah,
ask every guest, and these are a lot more general. They're kind of just like just filmmaking habit question, not filmmaking,
sure.
film watching habit questions. So we'll do that, and then we'll get out of here. But JR, first of all, what was the last thing you watched?
Last thing I watched was Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. I watched that with my dad like
Oh,
yesterday morning.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, is that the one?
Yeah, yeah, great
I've
acting in that
never
movie.
seen it. How is it?
It's cool. It was actually Sidney Lumet's last movie. It's cool. I think it's a solid story with excellent acting. I think the acting certainly elevates, what we're watching.
Yeah.
So yeah, solid flick.
Excellent. It's not available on physical here in Australia or streaming, so that's why I haven't watched it. But
Gotcha. Okay.
I have to import it from somewhere. That's that's why it's such an expensive habit. Um,
Yeah.
and what's a movie that's been on your watch list forever? I feel like as film fans, there's always something like I'll watch that eventually. For me, for the longest time, it was Citizen Kane, and I finally knocked that off the list. But there's always something that we haven't seen. So what's that one film it's been kind of in the back of your mind? You know you need to watch it, but you just haven't watched it yet.
I'll pick something recent actually. I'll
Okay.
pick The Brutalist because it's 4 hours and I really
Mm,
wanted to see it and I almost made plans to see it a couple different times and I was like, yeah, I'll catch it next time. I'll catch it next time. And now it's not in theaters anymore where I live. So
yeah.
that's something that I do want to see that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either, but it's also been on my list. I
Yeah.
as I mentioned before, I'm a little bit old. I've got a kid, So
Nice. God
a
bless.
lot of my
God
movie
bless.
watching habits are scheduled around her.
Yeah.
So like generally I don't go to the movies until like late at night and generally middle of the week,
Aw.
which is not when most people go to the movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I just couldn't find an early session for Brutalist, but I'll catch it on physical. It'll come out eventually,
Yeah.
and I'll check
Absolutely.
it out. We've talked about kind of going into the dark place. We talked about emotions quite a bit on this podcast today. Um,
Sure.
in terms of your movie watching habits, are you a crier? Are you someone who just gets quite emotional watching film?
Well, I like to think that sometimes I can be a very empathetic person.
Mm.
And I think also that's something that like playing that character and going to therapy has helped me out with is like finding more empathy in myself, finding
Mm.
more feelings, I guess, being more available emotionally. With that
Yep.
said though, I'm not a movie crier, but this is actually a recent film too. A movie that has recently made me like, upset was A Real Pain with Kieran
Okay.
Culkin.
Wow. What a
Yeah,
wonderful
that
movie.
was a real yeah, what a really great, beautiful movie, and I think everyone wants to say Kieran Culkin played himself, but I thought it was a great performance, and also I loved his work on Succession as well, the
Mm.
HBO series. So I'm a big Kieran Culkin guy, and I thought A Real Pain was a really beautiful movie that made me teary eyed.
It is a wonder. I just watched it last week. It just dropped on Disney Plus here in Australia. Because
Nice.
we get all the adult stuff on Disney Plus as well.
Yeah.
Um, and like everyone is talking about Anora, and rightfully so. But I do think people could be having more conversations about A Real Pain. Like that is like just
Yeah. A
a
great
beating
great
heart of
movie.
independent film. Like that is so
Yeah.
indie film, and like just like we were talking about with your movie before, like that film. Yes, it's got stars in it. Yes, it's got Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin,
Mhm.
but that feels like someone just dropped a camera in there and be like, "Hey, here's two real people talking," and like it's
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
natural.
Kieran Culkin's performance just, I feel like, elevates the entire thing. I think he's just so, again, people want to make the argument that he's playing himself, but I feel like it's just so natural. His acting, his performing is just so natural.
No, I agree entirely. I think, yeah, I don't think he's playing himself, but there's definitely you talked about it just before. Like when you invest in a role, you are putting parts of yourself in, of course, but
Yeah.
that's not good. Just like and like that might be the most restrained Jesse Eisenberg performance I've ever seen.
Yeah, I agree
Like,
with that too.
and I like him as an actor. I think he's fantastic. I think he's hugely underrated. Like a lot of
Yeah,
people like to kind of poke fun at the kind of neurotic approach he takes to his characters, but that's the
sure.
characters he plays. But seeing him play someone who's quite even keeled until he's not, in that movie,
Yeah,
like it was really wonderful. Uh,
absolutely.
Excellent. Um, we talked a lot about indie film, but in terms of maybe more mainstream stuff, maybe not necessarily mainstream stuff, is there a particular actor or actress who is your go-to? If you want to see a film, if they're in it, no questions asked, you're following them to anything. Is there a big actor or an actress that's
Mm,
kind of in your pocket?
I don't know. I don't really think I have like I think the age of movie star, I think that's kind of like a dead thing. I feel like people don't really like I don't know. A lot of the people I talk to, we don't really see movies because
Mm,
of one specific person. However, I'm trying to think. I don't know. I think if like Robert De Niro's in a movie, I'll check it out
mm.
for sure. And obviously that's someone that also has collaborated a lot with Martin Scorsese, who's a
Yeah.
huge hero of mine. But yeah, like someone like Robert De Niro, I think looking back, looking at movie stars, I think you really have to dig deep into like the old age of cinema. Pre 2000s, and I think there were some movie stars in the 2000s as well. But yeah, yeah. If I had to pick someone, I'd probably say Robert De Niro. I always love trying to discover his new films.
Mm. That's such a fascinating insight. I hadn't thought about that. Like you just made a very bold statement. The idea the age of the movie star might be dead, and I guess like in a world of social media and TikTok and the internet, like you're right.
Yeah.
Like we like it's almost on this kind of like hyper focused level. Like to just pick out a name that I think is on a lot of people's minds in the last year, someone like Sydney Sweeney. I'd never heard of her. Had
Hmm.
never heard of Sydney Sweeney, and then like just one day she was everywhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
She
then
was
she
in
was gone, and
a.
she's not gone. But then someone else filled the kind of the it girl role 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's an odd state of affairs because I think the great passion that was behind movies for so long, right? People wanting to go to a theater and see a movie. I
Mm.
think that was sort of brought to life by people's desire to go see a movie star, you know? Like
Mm,
that's my favorite actor, that's my favorite movie star. And I don't necessarily know if we have that anymore. And I think that's also because like you said, we have unlimited access to people now because of
mm,
social media and streaming and that sort of thing. So I don't necessarily know if there's that much of a desire to go and see a movie star, so to speak.
mm. Oh man, sorry, I just love your answer. I could listen to you
Thank
talk
you.
like for hours. Like
I
they're
appreciate that,
so
man.
like
Thank
well
you.
composed. Like I'm thinking about like myself when I was 18 or 19. I was an idiot, man. Like I was
That's
like I would
okay.
have been like I'm an idiot. I'm still an idiot. Like I would have been bumbling through, but like I just love listening to your answers. Like you can
Thank
tell
you, man. I appreciate that.
you just
Well,
care
we
so
definitely
much.
got
And
to do this again sometime. I'd love to come back.
definitely, man. We'll definitely like talk about some of your favorites. I'll hit you with two
Yeah,
more, and I'll let you go because I'm sure it's getting late
sure.
over there as well. We don't like to be negative, but what is the worst film you've ever seen?
The worst film I've ever seen, I don't think I'm someone that really like judges films on a really bad scale.
Yes.
However, I maybe if I had to pick the worst experience seeing a movie,
Yes. I like that.
uh,
Yeah, go for it.
so Michael Bay's Ambulance came out a couple years ago,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. I didn't see it, but one of my co-hosts talked about it. He was impressed by the use of drones. That was the big
yeah,
takeaway from it.
so
Yeah.
So my buddy Brandon and I, who is a major part of behind the scenes of my movies, he's the sound guy, just a big technical part of my movies for EdgeX and whatever else I worked on. My childhood best friend.
Oh,
We went to go
lovely.
see, yeah, we went to go see Michael Bay's Ambulance when it came out, and at the time we were like probably 15 or 16, so we were under the legal age for a rated R movie, at least in the States.
Yep.
And I feel like no one really pays attention to that sort of thing anymore. But unfortunately, the person that was checking our tickets was, very focused on that, focused on checking our IDs and that sort of thing. So, ultimately, we got kicked out of the theater basically because we were trying to see an underage movie. So that was a pretty shitty experience, and we did end up we we actually did end up seeing the movie like 2 weeks later at a different theater, and I was so disappointed, and I said to myself like, wow, we went through all that hassle just for this. And I didn't expect much because it's Michael Bay. But although I have to say Pain and Gain I think is truly a fucking fantastic film.
It
So,
is. It's really good.
yeah.
I think like he said I used to be like as the title of the podcast suggests, I used to be very pretentious about my film watching. I've tried a lot over the last few years to give everything a
Yeah.
go. So when you said you didn't have like a scale for bad, and I was like, yes, like that's how I feel now. Like there's nothing, in a world where every movie is someone's favorite film, like there can be no bad film. So I really love that. But
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
during like I think it was the Turtles era, like right after he'd been doing Transformers, he moved into Turtles. Like he
Hmm.
was under a lot of criticism because of the style of films. And he goes, I make movies for 14-year-old boys. Like, what's the crime? And I was like, oh my god, he's right. Like it did. Like then I didn't get it, but now I get it. I'm like, oh my god, of course he
Yeah.
does. Like, why is
Yeah.
that a problem? But then you look at Pain and Gain, which is an excellent film. You look
Yes,
at
I
his stuff in
agree.
the '90s, like he did,
So funny.
like The Rock and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's done some wonderful movies. So, but yeah, he made. Yeah, his biggest crime was catering to an audience. Like that's what we're
Yeah.
criticizing. Meanwhile, like people, other people like Tarantino or Sean Baker do it, and they get awards. So, like, yeah, it is
Yeah,
very,
absolutely.
very fickle. I like your answer. That there are no bad movies. Good.
Thank you.
All right, and then final question, and this might be a bit of a loaded one as well because it does, I guess, kind of broach the topic of sacred cows. But what is a
Sure.
movie that they should never remake?
That they should never remake, that's tough because 20 years from now they may remake some of my favorite movies. So,
Mm,
because they probably, I mean, there's never a shortage of ideas, but I think there's a shortage of giving, again, independent filmmakers a chance, and that's why we see so many sequels and reboots, and it's just a very sad state of affairs.
mm,
And I think reboots have always existed, like even going back to the golden age, so to speak, right? Or
mm,
even just a better time in movies. You look at the 90s and 80s. I mean, Scarface with Al Pacino, that's a remake.
mm.
Cape Fear, Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear, that's a remake.
Yeah, The
So
Thing
they,
is a remake.
yeah, they've always existed. I just think they're in a sad state of affairs right now.
Mm,
But with that said, a movie that I think should never be remade, Probably Goodfellas, like staying within the
I
topic of
knew you
Scorsese.
were going to say Goodfellas, and I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so hard to recreate that style. Like I think Martin Scorsese is just the only guy who can make all of his movies feel really cool, even if they're about terrible people.
Mm.
There's other filmmakers, like if you look at like a Guy Ritchie, I think he's like the English Scorsese, so to speak.
Oh, I think
Where
Guy
he
Ritchie would love to hear that. I think that's a very nice thing to
Yeah.
say. But
I
I,
do like Guy Ritchie. I like his earlier work more, like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and especially Snatch. Dude,
Snatch.
Snatch is one of my favorite films. Like that's in my top 5 favorite films. Um,
I feel like
but
Snatch is one of those films you never hear people talk about. Like you hear people talk about Lock,
yeah,
Stock,
it's
but it
so
never comes up
weird.
in the conversation. But I prefer Snatch to Lock, Stock. I think Snatch is
Yes, I
wonderful. I haven't
agree.
watched it in quite a while, but I remember watching them back to back, and I was like, oh, I know I'm supposed to love this one, but this one's really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I actually saw Snatch first because I think my dad had it on DVD. My dad is a big Guy Ritchie fan,
Hmm.
and I love Snatch. And then I'm like, you know what? I got to check out Lock, Stock because everyone seems to think that's his second best movie or his best movie. And I checked that out, and I'm like, okay, that was really good, but Snatch, dude, that's like on a whole nother level to me.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's another movie nobody should ever try and remake.
Well, the fact that no one's talking about it, I think they'll probably get away with it. Like, but people need to,
Yeah.
like, all right, once you're done listening to this podcast, go and watch EdgeX first, of course. Once you've watched EdgeX, go watch Snatch, and like you will be so glad you did. It's so much
Yeah,
fun.
absolutely.
The whole parking lot scene where Tyrone can't park the car cracks me up
Yes,
every single
yes. And it
time.
goes so fast too. It's such a
Mm.
fast-paced movie.
And that's
So
like
well paced.
it's pre Hollywood Jason Statham before he became this megastar.
Yes,
Because I know
yes.
he gets a lot of flack. People look at him and they're like, oh, like he's just doing these
He is really great in those 2 movies. Absolutely.
wonderful, and he's good in other stuff as well. But I think
Yeah,
like
like
he just
Rock and
became
Rolla too, right? He's in
oh
Rock and
rock and
Rolla.
roller. No one talks
Yeah.
like if people aren't talking about Snatch, no one's talking about rock and roller. But that's a wonderful movie as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
he kind of got pigeonholed into like the bald tough guy role. It was like him, The
Yeah,
Rock, and a
yeah.
couple others. Like no,
Vin
no, no, it's
Diesel.
Statham. Yeah, Vin Diesel. But Statham's got some chops. Like he's done some wonderful stuff.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes, he does.
Excellent. Look, those are some wonderful answers, and you've an absolute
Yeah.
dream to talk to today, man.
Thank
Like,
you, man.
thank
I
you so much
appreciate
for
that. It's been
carving
incredible
out.
chatting with you.
Excellent. So, for those of you, again, the movie is EdgeX. It's on YouTube right now. It's free. It's been out for about 4 months, 5 months.
Yeah.
So definitely go and check it out. You'll be look. It might not be for everyone. It's tough, but it's so well made. The performances, just at least like get to JR's performance because oh my god, like you won't sleep. He's so wonderful in it. Where can they find you on socials, man?
They can find me on Instagram, YouTube, all the same username at Sid Cinematics, just Sid Cinematics. So yeah, YouTube,
But
Instagram, Letterboxd.
go follow him. Go watch the flick. It's incredible. Like it is a tour de force. Like I know that's a phrase
Thank
that's
you
thrown
so
around a lot,
much.
but it's such a wonderful flick. It
Thank
has
you so
stayed with
much.
me. And look, I said it's tough. It's not that tough. You can handle it. Like if you're in my audience, you can definitely handle it. Go and watch it. Send him some love, and a huge thanks again to JR.
Yeah.
He's welcome back anytime he wants.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you, everyone.
But anyway, until then, thank you all for listening. You can hit me up on socials. I was a teenage film snob, underscores between every single word. Go get some merch. Go send some likes to our reviews. And that's going to do it. So thank you all again for listening. And as I say every week on the show, guys, I was a teenage film snob, but I'm trying to be better. We'll see you next week.